Welcome back. My name's Ken Rethmeyer, and this is episode 4 of the Leading for Value podcast that I've been designing and delivering on the basis of my book entitled Leading for Value. And it came to my attention that one of the ways that I could give back to others would be to do some of these podcasts using the book and the tools, the models to share with you all. Because at my point in my career and my age, this is what I think I can do best. And I think back on the quote you see above that I found many, many years ago, and it has guided my own thinking and my own actions as a leader and someone who mentors others for leadership, because it's a key piece of how the journey takes place. That leadership is having the courage to act, to do what is right, not to wait and see, not to wait and hope, but the courage to get involved now. And when I found that, there was no author. And I thought, how nice, because somebody did it. Somebody said it. They didn't put their name on it. They're not going to get the glory attached to that. But it's a useful tool and a concept and a model and a guideline for me in my own journey. And I really appreciate whoever put that together. So we're going to share the screen now, and we'll get started with the actions for today. And I can tell you that, again, episode 4 in this series. And this is one of those sessions that I really enjoy because, and not that I don't enjoy the others, but this one's really cool because this one we get to talk and explore the idea of the role of a vision in an organization. What it is, what it isn't, how do you use it, how do you develop it, how do you reaffirm it if you need to do that in your own organization. And the book, I think, has some good opportunities to learn about how to do that. And we'll talk about that as we go along. And one of the key pieces that I learned many, many years ago is that the vision can be an effective tool if it's spread across the organization in a meaningful way. And as a leader, as the minute you step out of your office, you ought to have that vision in the back of your head. So if something comes up, you can say, let me remind you about our vision in this organization, whether it's healthcare, the oil industry, retail, doesn't matter, financial services, it doesn't matter. When you start speaking, they're going to listen, and what you say is going to be so critical. And that's what we refer to as the elevator speech. And it's called an elevator speech because typically when you get in an elevator, you have about maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, depending upon the length and height of the building. And you have an opportunity when someone says, hey, what's going on these days? Tell me about what's happening with our company, where we're going. When I was mayor of the town of Bermuda Run in North Carolina, I had to have that vision speech, that elevator speech in the back of my head every time I went to Harris Teeter's grocery store. Because I'd run into somebody and they'd say, hey, Mayor, what's going on with such and such? And I could get back and use the vision to set the context for the discussion. And then we're going to do a little bit about what's called the vision versus current reality. And that's a really important tool for you and your organization to use. And for a leader, it's a great opportunity to gain new insight on what your people are thinking and how they're focusing on the goals of the organization as set forth by the vision. And I have a list that I went out and Googled of some great organizational vision statements, and I hope you find them interesting. I found them quite interesting. And the task for you is to think about what you believe is a best-in-class vision statement that maybe you've seen or you have heard. And think about why is it the best and why is that important? It's important because that way you can describe for others the value of that process that happened to get to that point or to move on into what actions we're taking to live the vision. We often refer to that about the vision as what wants to be. And that's the thing that we don't talk about enough, I think. The elements, it's a picture. And the better you can draw the picture for a desired state of the future for the organization, that's even better. And I can tell you that I refer back to the artist Degas, and he said over and over again, it's not what I can see, it's what I can help others to see. And again, for a leader, that holds true again. If I'm out of my office and I'm the leader, I need to be prepared to respond to questions. But it also gives me a great opportunity to tell people, think about our vision. Think about the role you have in fulfilling that vision. And I remember at one hospital, I challenged the CEO. It was a Methodist Hospital of Houston, matter of fact. I challenged the CEO because he was going on and on and on about how great the vision was and so forth and so on. And I said, okay, I'm going to find out. So I stood outside the cafeteria after lunch, and as people came out, I stopped them and said, tell me what you think about the vision of Methodist Hospital of Houston. And I'll tell you what, 98% of those people knew the vision, then they knew what contributions they were making in that regard. And that's critical. That's the most important part, because that says a vision is compelling and it's motivational, and it energizes people to want to do the great job. And I've seen that in hospitals that I've visited over my career in consulting. And mainly, I've learned that it's a great opportunity to ask people about what they see. And it's the core values and the qualities of that organization. It's sort of the spine, if you will, that it represents the strength of that organization. Now, a vision needs to be easily articulated and understood. If it's not, then you're going to have a problem where you're going to constantly having to reinterpret, re-explain. And what you want it to be is something that people say, hey, I know that. I know what I can do to help. And then it sets the stage for creating and implementing what I'll refer to as foundational strategies for success. And those foundational strategies draw on the strength of the entire organization, not just one part of that organization, the whole organization to make it best. And so if we're looking about that, creating the long view, if you will, then a visioning exercise that has a context, thinking, and productive dialogue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of set the stage with a few comments, and then we'll walk through some tasks or steps to help make that process. But before I go too far, I want to remind you that the vision is something that either the leader of the organization creates and sells to the organization, or the leader knows, he or she, what they generally want for that vision, but they bring their management team or other parts of the organization together to facilitate a dialogue to make it happen. So that's an important piece. And that's where I say it's either recommitting to an existing vision and reapplying, this is how you can help make a difference, or create a new vision. And I did both in my consulting career. In one case, it was the oil company, and we had a lot of fun putting it together. And once we reached consensus, everybody said, I can own that. I can do something to make it work. And that was absolutely critical. So for healthcare, for example, the environment, key issues and opportunities for the people you serve. And that has really been brought to home pretty starkly with the pandemic, both in Europe and in the United States, because it's sort of reopened a great deal of dialogue about what's going on in our community. And as a healthcare organization, what can we do to reduce some of the problems that we see as a result that either came out of the pandemic or secondarily or reinforced and made some issues even more intense. In other industries, like my oil company consulting, creating a vision to reinforce and set, they wanted to reestablish and clearly identify their competitive advantage over other organizations and new ways of doing business. And over that 7-year period that I worked with them, we did a lot of work in terms of their lines of business that they had. We reduced one and removed it, and the other two we made some changes to make their position in the environment of oil and the oil refineries more competitive than it was before. And as a leader, your goal is full team involvement and senior team active ownership. You're only one person, and I recognize one person can do a lot, but you need everybody on board, walking in the same direction, having the same sense of ownership. And I like the quote down below because that's what it's all about. It's not what the vision is, it's what the vision does. And that comes from Peter Senge, Continuous Learning Organization Concepts. So let me walk through the stepwise process, and I'll do it pretty quickly. And it will vary depending upon whether you're recommitting to the vision or creating a vision. So you just have to make adjustments to your planning and your execution based on those starting points. But I have found invariably, regardless of how big of organization it is and the groups that you're going to bring together to make it happen, having 4 to 6 people in a group actually encourages and enhances participation, because there'll be groups, if you have them too big, there'll be people in those groups who will either be perhaps intimidated or maybe more not the kind of people that are like to be out in the open, more introverted. And so you want to make sure that you have a group that will really actively participate and have a productive dialogue. So what do? You take your groups, subgroups, and you have them to brainstorm and capture their vision ideas based upon what they know. And of course, the starting of any of these, the leader or owner of the organization, of the company, needs to set up and sort of set the stage and sort of give what he or she believes is the right movement and direction that we want to go, but at the 30,000-foot level, if you will. And then when they come through the ideas, you want those groups to identify the top 3 or 4 in rank order, and then bring those back to the whole group. And they share their top ideas, and then the whole group reaches consensus on those 5, 6, or 7 key ideas that are going to be the part of the new vision or confirming the old vision. So then you set up some new groups. Each person then drafts a proposed vision statement, and that's where it gets very interesting. Taking the top ideas and crafting it in your own words, and then sharing that with the rest of the group. You want to get consensus. The groups share their results, and the participants are asked to listen carefully, think about the context, think about the environment they're in, and then reach consensus on what the whole group believes is the best vision statement for the organization. It's all about what is resonating, if you'll pardon that pun. And if it's resonating, then that's the kind of thing that will get a good vision statement in the end. And then obviously at the very end, you want to celebrate your time for success. And we'll come back to that again and again. If you're revalidating an existing, then just modify some of the steps above and you'll get that work done. So that's the first tool. It's about creating or reinvesting or recommitting to a vision that already exists. And it's a key piece. And I guarantee you, as a leader, as you're sitting there or listening or watching these groups, you will learn a lot about what's inside of them. What are they seeing as the core of the organization that makes it a great organization? So I told you I Googled some names and I asked for their current vision statements because they do change. organizations change, environments change. And so as a consequence, what you might have seen Nike, for example, vision statement 20 years ago isn't the same today. But I want you to take a look at these, look at them, ponder what they say. Think about the implications in your own organization. And if you're the leader of that organization, how you would focus their attention on those important concepts. And then consider how you might take the learnings from these and apply it to your own organization, because that's critical. So you can see Nike to remain the most authentic, connected, and distinctive brand. Google, I thought that was a very good one, to provide access to the world's information in one click. And see, that tells you a lot about the role that Google wants to play in the process. Then you see Tesla's, Uber, Disney, and I can tell you this vision statement is different than I remember Disney many, many years ago. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. But to be one of the best world's leading producers and providers of entertainment and information. And Walt Disney's vision was to create an environment for wholesome family entertainment. That was his vision. And Amazon, I thought, was a good one and pretty realistic to what they do. Our vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online. And I think they've done a pretty good job of that. If you think about it, next time you want to buy something, what do you say? Do you think you might say, I have to check Amazon because if I can, they just ship it to me. Or do I want to go down to the place where I want to buy that? It's an interesting concept. But again, vision statements are very, very important to the whole process. Now the elevator speech. A concise, well-planned, well-designed spiel. And what do I mean? The vision of the organization is the context. The elevator speech is a way of articulating that vision in a way that people can understand. So you want to be very clear and create a living message that others will hear and think about what it means. The leader's visions, key strategies, values, looking forward to the future. Those are all elements of a good elevator speech. You don't have to hit them all, but you need to hit at least 2 or maybe 3. And it's a short story. It creates energy and it's self-explanatory. And again, I'll go back to the time when I was mayor of Bermuda Run, North Carolina for 8 years. Every time I went to the store, I had to have that elevator speech ready to talk to them about what we were seeing in our future and what we were going to do to protect our people and so forth and so on. So you want to practice to get it well organized and meaningful, no more than 2 minutes or so in length, and it may create questions that you need to be prepared to answer. And then you want to be clear about the intent, the takeaways, and it shows your passion. So it's an emotional statement. It's not just a reading from the cards or reading from the script. It is your perception. And when you speak, you want people to look at you and say, I understand. That guy or that lady got it. She helped me understand as well. So you want to close with a specific message and a positive statement, something that will say, okay, let's go. We're going to get going. And remember, you're on stage, not off stage. What do I mean by that? Every time you step out of your office, you're on stage. When you're in your office, you're off stage. Where did I come up with that? I didn't. I was very fortunate as an undergraduate student at UCLA in the 60s to be able to work for a guy named Walt Disney at Disneyland. And I tell people I had the best job on the park. It was amazing because I was the skipper and guide down the rivers of adventure. Yep, the Jungle Cruise. And I had a great time doing it. I have some really funny stories that I can tell. But it was a real on-stage, off-stage lesson for me as a leader. And I used Disney constantly as a reference, because I believe if you think about your role as a leader and the minute you step out of your office, the people are going to be watching you. They're going to be listening to what you say. And if you do something or you say something that is contrary to what the people think they ought to hear, you might need to be prepared to explain. Stay on script. Why is that important? Don't just wander around. Keep that vision so that when they hear it, they know what their role is and how they would say it if they were doing it. Make it a real experience. And like I said, Disney created an environment of family entertainment. And also, when we got ready, we got in costume down underneath the park. We lined up. They did an inspection. I saw one guy get fired one day because he was told the day before to get a haircut. He didn't do it. Disney was very strict about how people looked and how they behaved because he wanted everybody in the park to represent him, sort of a living enterprise throughout the whole park. And remember, even today, even when I worked there many, many years ago, Walt was watching, even though he had passed a couple of years before. Now, this is going to get interesting because that lesson was a critical lesson. I didn't know it at the time, a critical lesson I learned as a leader. So let's fast forward to tape 20 years. And in 1987, I was a captain and I had just been assigned as a commanding officer of the Naval School of Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland. And as a consequence, at the 6-week level, I had to give a strategy speech. And the person who was the CO before I was ran it with a rather tight fist. And unfortunately, people weren't very creative. They didn't get engaged in their work. And I wanted to shake them up. So I called my master chief and my executive officer in the day before the speech. And I said, okay, I'm not going to tell you what I want to do, but I want you to watch the crowd. And if those people get it, let me know their names. And we were the largest of 4 schools. We had both officer programs and hospital Corps C schools. I had 6 detachments, including 1 in Groton, Connecticut, where we taught undersea medicine, and in Panama, where we taught medicine for the Southeast Asia area. And that was very important. And imagine, you see, I was a 4-striper standing up in front of 500 people. And opening lines of my strategy speech were the opening lines of the Jungle Cruise. Welcome aboard, unwary travelers. My name is Ken. I'll be your skipper and guide down the rivers of adventure. But before we get too far away, I want you to turn around, wave goodbye to your friends and family. It may be the last time you see them. And the spiel goes on for about 10 or 11 more minutes. And believe it or not, when you say that spiel 25 times a day, you remember the spiel. But the important thing for my command was that I wanted to let people know we were going to do things differently. And I had a different thought about how we could be better. And so I told the XO and the command master chief, I want the 8 people that you saw in my office tomorrow morning because we together are going to change this command. And in 6 months, I won't go into detail, we did. And it became a top-notch organization. So let's get to this idea of vision and current reality. Current reality is today, where we are as an organization, obstacles, challenges, things that are happening on the positive side, things that aren't happening so well. And the purpose of a vision then is to set the stage for what is our goal and what we want to see. So I recommend that when you're going through these processes in episode 4 to have a facilitator. That usually is the best way to have an effective dialogue. So what I would do is I would typically say the connection between vision and current reality is my right hand represents the vision and my left hand represents current reality. and I put a rubber band between them. And if I pull my vision up and make it very aggressive, what am I doing? What am I creating? And I'll usually have people shout out whatever they think. And the idea is to see what people are thinking about that process at the point. And then we come to, dynamic tension. And the discussion that we have is the implications for how do we deal with that? Because there's positives and negatives, and we want an open and frank dialogue so we can get all these out on the plate, if you will. And as a consequence, we want to make sure that the vision is the core principle. And the idea is that the vision draws current reality up. Or if not, guess what happens? The organization fails to live up to its expectations. And more often than not, I hate to say it, when I was dealing with an organization that was struggling, the vision wasn't strong enough. The ways of implementing that vision weren't strong enough. And as a consequence, current reality pulled it down. So we want to confront those brutal facts. We want to have an opening dialogue about that helps us gather the ideas about how we can make a difference. And from my perspective, for you all as leaders, it's a pivotal opportunity for leadership. And I'll go through this sort of quickly. Vision versus current reality, the preparation, best to have some roundtables for the better dialogue. Set up 2 flip charts. And the first task is to sort of clarify and confirm the vision. And what are the opportunities? What are we really trying to create? And get that up on the board, so to speak. Then current reality. What are the positives and obstacles? And at that point, the participants will write on, I recommend like Post-it notes, pluses or minuses as ideas, and put those notes up on the flip chart showing, say, on the right side, those obstacles going against it, the left side, the opportunities. And we could reverse that. I think I might have in the next slide. But the groups are looking for common ideas and common themes that will then translate into priorities and actions that can be taken to leverage the positives and overcome the negatives, because that's a very important piece. And there's a tool in the next episode that I'll go over to how to do that. But the spokesperson of each group then reports. There's a Q&A time. And the last is to have a brainstorming session to consensus about ways to reduce the gap between current reality and the vision. So when you see one, in some cases, we can't do anything about it. We just have to leave that alone. But in those that we can do something, we can either remove or reduce its negative impact or leverage the positives. Then you have a good way of working towards what you want to achieve. And as a leader, I know when I was involved in that kind of work, I felt a lot better. And I remember when I was first stationed in Washington, D.C., I had a group of budget analysts that challenged me a lot. I challenged them, but we got a lot done, and a lot done very, very well. So final notes, it's groups, action, reports, and as I said, outside facilitator. Okay, this concludes episode 4 of Leading for Value series of episodes. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, number 5. I'll give you a hint. We're going to deal with current reality. Then we're going to look at something that you may have heard about, but not a lot. And that is identifying critical business opportunities and obstacles, because that's a very important part of the business. And I can tell you, when I was working with Starcon International, the oil company, we had a great time identifying those business opportunities and obstacles, because the oil industry is one of the most competitive industries in the world. And now healthcare is becoming the same. Believe it or not, you never know. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we'll close up for this session. I thank you very, very much for your attention. And I look forward to seeing you again in episode 5. Have a great time. I'll see you then.